everyone, I'm Nikki Haverstock. I'm a self-published author on Amazon, and this is the Author 2 portion of my YouTube channel, and I'm here today to discuss experience versus education in terms of being the best writer you can. Do you need to experience being writing, just lots and lots of time writing, or education as in craft books, formal classes, even YouTube videos? Which one is going to make you the better writer? Okay, and the answer, my opinion, is both. End of video, thank you for coming. No, obviously there's many more to say, and you probably, when you heard the introduction, thought, well, obviously both. You can't write books without writing books, and you can't get better without maybe learning something. Now, when I say education, I want to broaden that category. So if you're already thinking, maybe you already had an issue with that. Maybe you said, I don't need additional classes. I don't need to watch YouTube videos. Like, I watch them because I enjoy them, but I don't need them. Maybe you're like, oh, you're just pushing this idea that you have to buy your way into being a better writer. I'm also going to say that education can be reading books that you really enjoy and analyzing why. I'm going to say it could be talking to other people. It could be talking to even your friend and going through stuff. I'm going to give a very, very broad view of the word education. And experience is just time spent behind your computer or behind, if you do it by hand. I have bad hands, and so I would fall to pieces, and my writing is atrocious. But you know, it could be that. And so what this video is more about is what happens when you start sliding one side or to the other. And I'm going to start with talking about when you slide too far into the experience category. And I do meet people. I've been in a lot of writing groups. I've been in, I don't know, 50, let's say. I've forums. I've gone to one convention, which is not a ton, but I've talked to a lot of writers. I see them on Twitter, everywhere, Facebook, all this stuff, YouTube. I've encountered a lot of writers, and sometimes you meet people who've been writing the same book for 20 years. Now, I'm not here to judge. I'm not saying it's inherently a bad thing, but sometimes you'll meet people who've been writing the same book for 20 years with no additional information coming in. I'm going to quote Neil Gaiman here because I don't think you care what I have to say, but I am going to quote Neil, which is that he said, you learn more from finishing one bad book than you do from starting 10 great books. And what that means is that it is a full cycle. Okay, so think of it if you were baking a cake. Let's say you were going to bake a cake. You wanted to be the most amazing baker ever, but all you ever did was mix up the ingredients, and you never baked them. Okay, well, you might go, well, it doesn't make any sense. How would you know how good the cake is? Exactly. So you got to kind of do the whole process. Start something, go to the middle, finish it, go through the editing process, make it bigger. I would even say at some point you need to get, I'm going to say, feedback. So in my case, that tends to be, because I've published my books, publishing them, getting feedback when I see who's responding, how does it review? Are people recommending it to friends? How does it sell? That whole thing. So so the idea is you have to write, and there's people that with experience, okay, I'm kind of getting a little, this is all valid, but I'm getting a little bit off point. So what I do see is sometimes people who just keep starting stuff over and over and over again, and they know it's not exactly working, so they stop and they start something new. And the problem is you can't figure out how to start a story until you finish it. You got to do the whole thing. You got to bake the whole cake. You got to mix up the cake. You've got to put it in the oven. You've got to bake it. You've got to pull it out. You've got to ice it, you know, do all the icing and everything, and then you have to eat it. And you have to do that whole thing. Now, I'm not saying to finish everything you start, because if you are baking a cake, this analogy holds, and you dump all of the eggshells into the mix, I'm not telling you, go ahead and bake that and pull it out and eat it, and you're going to be like, yeah, there's a bunch of eggshells in there. You probably still learned something. You might say that even with the eggshells in it, the thing is a mess. It is harder than a rock. It smells disgusting. You still might learn something, but it's also okay. I've started stories and been like, this is not for me. When I started, all of my friends wrote very high heat, which just means very sexually explicit language. The language that's being used is not euphemistic. They didn't join together as one. There is a whole textbook going on. And they were all making good money, and I thought, well, maybe that's me. It was not me. But I tried, But I thought, you know, how do I feel about this? It didn't feel like it was a right fit for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It's not a judgment call. It just wasn't the right fit for me. There may be people who go the opposite direction. They're dark and they're moody and high conflict, and they thought, I want to write something light and joyful. And they start, and they, you know, next thing you know, they've got demons and they've got Ouija boards and they've got a torture scene, and they go, this is not working. So I'm not saying to finish everything you start, but you should try, if you feel like this is kind of in your wheelhouse, this is kind of working, it's worth finishing. So that is my example of when you get too far on the, I'm just becoming a magically better writer by just writing, but I'm never going to finish the process. I'm never going to go through the education. I kind of consider editing to be a part of education. I know some people who've done okay. They've done not, I'll say, not as well as they would like to do. So that means they're not meeting their goal. And they've only done copy edits. If you're not familiar with copy edits are things like lay versus lie. Are your commas in the right spot? All of that. And you are not paying them to do things like, say, my copy editors will point this out, but they're going to only do it a little bit, because you're paying them. The normal way that editors are paid in the indie world is by the word count, which means that they're going to do what they can at that level. So if you are such a hot mess, they might tell you, one, we can't do this, or they might have to say, we did what we could at this rate. There are editors who do it by the hour, in which case, depending on how much work your book needs, I won't say bad, how much work your book currently needs for editing might take significantly difference. But in general, when you are paying a copy editor, they're supposed to be looking at copy edit level things. They're trying to look, like I said, lay versus lie. That word's not being used correctly, that kind of thing. But they're not being paid to say things like, you know, in chapter 1, he said that he didn't trust anyone. And in chapter 10, he said that he's been, you know, that he's too trusting. That's not really their job. I know you would like them to just fix everything, but that's not their job. That is a developmental or content editor. They're technically also not paid to do things like, this would flow better if this chapter and these paragraphs were switched, or these chapters were switched. And so I really feel like a really good content or development editor, or even a line edit, if you've never had one, can be extremely educational. So those are kind of all examples, and you can think of a lot more. I'm sure you can. Hit me up below if you can think of some examples of people that you've met who are kind of caught in this, I'm just going to magically be a better author by creating a lot of work and never getting any education in. Okay. Now, on the other hand, are people who go nuts so crazy, thinking they can educate themselves out of experience. And what I mean is, and this is definitely me. This category is me. I struggle with it all the time, because I feel like I could just magically become a better writer without writing if I just learned enough. Now, you absolutely become a better writer by learning, but you can't neglect that experience over here. And this tends to be where I am. This is my personality. A lot of authors I know are also in this tend to be this personality, but not all of them. So you might not relate to this. I have more feelings on this because it's something I do and I can describe and recognize. Now, one of the problems is when I am living over here in this world is that I get scared to write, because I'm not going to do it right. I'm not going to do it R-I-G-H-T. So I try to think, if I just learn enough, if I'm just smart enough, I'll write the best book I can. And the truth is, you got to have this, and that does involve the fact that you're still on a learning curve. You're still going to get better. So you meet these people who feel like they, and sometimes it can unconsciously come from educators. One of the things that I hear a lot, and it is true, this is not me throwing shade at anyone, it is true, which is, you need to figure out your brand. Absolutely true. The problem is, I don't think it's mentioned enough, is that part of figuring out your brand is writing a lot of stuff. Some people right away hit it, their first book, it's perfect. There's a lot of amazing authors who have gone through multiple iterations. Rachel Caine, who I believe is in hospice care right now, I read her, I didn't realize it was the same Rachel Caine that I read in the early aughts and the early 2000s, who did like urban fantasy, adventure kind of thriller books. And she now writes very popular thrillers. But she had a thing where she talks about all the different iterations of her career. Multiple traditional authors, especially because they've been doing it much longer. People who are only indie only started in 2011. So either you were a traditional author or you weren't an author before that. So if you've been in the business for 40 years, you had some of that was traditional as a traditional author. And they'll talk about all the different iterations. One of my favorite examples is Janet Ivanovich, who does the One for the Money, Two for the One for the Money, I don't remember all of them. But she does the Stephanie Plum series, and she originally wrote just straight up romance. And if you read them, you can see the early iterations of her characters that eventually showed up in her mysteries. Anyway, it is absolutely true that you need to learn your brand, but for, unfortunately, a majority of us, we've got to publish books first. And you have to see, what do you enjoy writing, not once, not twice, but like 5 times, 10 times? What are your readers responding to? Are they, are you too slow paced? Is there too much sex for your mystery? Maybe you should be in romantic suspense. Is there too little? I have a friend who's an amazing writer, and her books just were not hot enough. The books that she loved in romance had a couple of sex scenes, and the current market at the time she was writing wanted really intense and a lot of sex scenes, and it wasn't a fit for her. And so she moved over to cozy mystery, where she got to keep her romance. She got tired of writing sex scenes, and she's making a lot more money doing that. And that doesn't mean that she did something wrong. I don't know that she could have gotten there if she hadn't started here. And so a lot of times, and I'm sure whatever author tuber says, you need to figure out your brand. If you were to flat out ask them, I don't know every author tuber, I don't know any author tubers, but if you were to ask them, I bet you they would agree that, yeah, part of that is writing a lot. You've got to write a lot and figure it out. So when I talk about if you need experience or education, and education can also be classes, learning from books, AuthorTube videos like this, talking to people that are, that also have knowledge that they can impart, that they've learned that they haven't shared with you. There's a great analogy from the book Art and Fear that talks about the fact that there was a class and they divided the class in half, and this group only had to make, or I guess it would be this group in this case, one group only had to make the perfect piece of pottery. That's all they needed to do. They would be graded on how perfect this was. And this group over here only had to make pottery. And they would be graded on their finished products. They would just weigh them. 50 pounds is an A, 40 pounds is a B, 30 pounds is a C, so on and so forth. And at the end, so this is an example of experience, this is a thing of education. And they said at the end, without a doubt, all of the best work was over here, because this group spent so long spinning their wheels and discussing what makes great pottery that they weren't actually making stuff. And over here, this group spent a lot of time making stuff, and so through experience. So what I am saying is it's a combination of both. You should never stop learning, but you definitely need to have experience, but they need to be working together. And I hopefully gave some clear examples. Maybe I'll do another video if this is more clear. But of what happens when you try to rely on just one. For me, I shut down into fear, because I know that I can't implement the stuff that I've learned perfectly. And so I think if I just wait long enough, I'll become perfect, and that's not true. And then over here is that every once in a while you have to stop and try to push yourself to be better than you currently are. And that that comes from some sort of new input that you don't have. So they've got to work together. Anyway, yeah, I guess tell me your favorite thing below that you've done to grow your experience or to grow your education, or both. Okay, bye.